When Beet Western Yellows Virus erupted in canola crops across the southern region, GRDC released $315,000 in emergency funding, part of which was used to collect and test Green Peach Aphid populations for resistance to key insecticide groups. The aphid is the primary vector for transmission of the virus. Melbourne Science Research Facility, cesar, carried out the analysis.
Look, it's not great news. Unfortunately, we've found widespread resistance to the three main chemicals that are used to control green peach aphids, or certainly the insecticides that are used as foliar applications. So organophosphates, synthetic pyrethroids and carbamate, so things like pyramecarb. So for those three chemical classes, we've found that most populations now in southeastern Australia actually appear to be resistant to all of those chemicals.
A picture of green peach aphid's resistance to chemicals registered for use in canola had been building over the past few years. The autumn outbreak of Beet Western Yellows Virus added greater urgency to the task.
We received about 80 populations of aphids that were sent in from agronomists and growers, and these came from across South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. And within about a 4-week period we were charged with screening up to about 50 of those. And so that's, I guess, what we were responsible for doing, is delivering those resistance results back out to growers in a fairly short period of time, so that if sprays were going to be required coming into spring, people knew what they could and couldn't apply.
A new chemical class registered for the control of aphids in canola provided a solution: sulfoxaflor, trade name Transform. But its longevity will be reliant on more chemistry becoming available so it can be used in rotations with other insecticides.
It's a species that worldwide has developed resistance to more chemicals than almost any other insect pest, so it certainly has the propensity to develop resistance very quickly to new chemicals. Hence the reason, I guess, for resistance management strategies, but also more broadly thinking about what we can actually do to limit the number of chemicals being put out in the system in the first place.
Green peach aphid's global profile also means it's one of the most studied aphids internationally, and its resistance mechanisms are well characterised.
And so we actually know exactly which genes are responsible for resistance to which particular chemical classes. So we can then design molecular markers around that knowledge to actually be able to do fairly quick and fairly cheap screens of individuals or populations to actually determine whether they actually have those genes responsible for resistance or not. So, you know, we're quite fortunate in this case that it is such a worldwide pest, because it really allowed us to, I guess, short-circuit a lot of the research that ordinarily you would have to do to identify what the resistance mechanisms are and then develop those DNA tests based on that.
The forensic analysis of the Beet Western Yellows Virus and Green Peach Aphid infestation of 2014 will draw on the work of all the R&D facilities and state government departments caught in its wake. And while much has yet to be confirmed, lessons have been learnt.
We now obviously have a very concrete picture of, I guess, the extent of resistance in green peach aphids. We obviously have a really good understanding of I guess, the damage they can actually cause to canola crops, but I guess to a lesser extent to pulse crops, in terms of not just their feeding damage, but obviously their potential of spreading viruses. And I guess it reiterates the message that we need to be thinking more strategically and smartly about how we control a lot of these insects, particularly ones that we know are very easily able to develop resistance. So we need to think about, you know, truly integrated strategies that are not just relying on chemicals, but thinking about the cultural and biological control options as well.
Critically important to the forensic report will be the experience of those on the ground during the explosion of green peach aphid numbers and subsequent outbreak of Beet Western Yellows Virus. A survey to gather this information has been targeted at agronomists initially, and their anecdotes, insights and actions will help frame the findings and recommendations to be made available before next season's canola goes in. Immediately though, growers can source management information from GRDC's website.
With green peach aphid, there is actually a recently, I guess, developed resistance management strategy for that species in the grain system. This was actually developed this year by, I guess, a group of entomologists and resistance experts in consultation with the agribusiness sector. And that strategy is now available to growers, and it does encompass all of Australia and separates out the different strategies that might be actually needed depending on the region and depending on the crop in which a grower is actually dealing with. And so that's a very useful resource for people to think about how we might actually manage resistance in this species over the longer term.
A Green Peach Aphid fact sheet and management strategies can be downloaded from the GRDC and IPM guidelines websites.